Hello everyone and welcome to TCA's Year 7 lesson about the Battle of Hastings. You should have already completed a starter activity as part of your team's live introduction today, and basically that was a reflection of what you did just before the Christmas holidays, where we looked at the three contenders for the throne in 1066. So we're going to make a start on today's lesson. I just want to remind you that whilst you're watching this video there will be tasks to complete, so you should pause this video where you need to, particularly when I ask you to, in order to complete the tasks. And remember that your teachers are still live on Teams throughout this hour, and so it's important that you do go to your teacher to ask questions if you're stuck or if you just want to share some of your thoughts about the lesson. Also, if you don't have your book with you, could you make sure that you write your notes on paper and make sure that you bring your paper back into school when you return. So first of all, what I'd like you to do is to write down today's title on your piece of paper or in your books. The title is, "Why did one particular candidate win the Battle of Hastings in 1066? Don't forget to make sure you've got capital letters for the event. So basically, guys, we're going to be looking at the Battle of Hastings, but we're also going to be looking at another battle called the Battle of Stamford Bridge. And throughout both of these battles, the three contenders that we looked at before half term were involved at different occasions. So this will become more clear as we go through today's lesson. The first thing I would like you to do, Year 7, is to put your first subheading underneath your title. So your subheading is the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Again, be sure to remember your capital letters for the event. Now, the first thing, guys, is that I'd like you to basically write down some bullet points underneath your subheading about what happened during the Battle of Stamford Bridge. So under your subheading, you're just going to add some bullet points. There are some on the board here that can help you. So there's basically details about what actually happened during Stamford Bridge battle. I'm going to be talking you through the event, and you need to make sure that you're writing things down into your book as I'm talking. I'm going to highlight some key things that you must make sure that you include in your notes. But remember, you don't have to write down every single word. You can basically just refer to the key things in your bullet points. Shorten it down and make sure you just get down the key facts. So let's get started, guys. In terms of the Battle of Stamford Bridge, it was the first battle that took place at this occasion in 1066, where the three contenders were fighting for the throne. Now, as we remember from our starter, the three contenders are Harold Godwinson from England, Harold Hardrada from Norway, and also William of Normandy from France. Now, these three contenders are both going to be involved at some point, but this first battle only includes Harold Godwinson, who at the time was crowned King Harold II. The other person involved in Stamford Bridge is Harold Hardrada, the King of Norway. These two men fought it out in a battle of Stamford Bridge. Now, I want to talk to you a bit about the preparations that both of these men made. So as we know, Harold Godwinson was already the King of England at the time because he was near the old king's deathbed as he was dying, and therefore he was able to get a bit of an advantage. Harold Hardrada was coming to take the throne from Godwinson. So Harold Hardrada is going to invade England from Norway with 300 ships. And it's important that we recognise, guys, as well, the location that he's coming from is basically going to be a bit further north. I'm just going to circle on the map for you where the Vikings are heading in terms of the location on the map of England. So they're basically attacking from the north. Remember, Harold Godwinson as the king is obviously going to be down in London. So he's got to make a really long journey north in order to meet Harold Hardrada in battle. So Harold Godwinson, also known as Harold II, basically prepares for an invasion and waits for one. The problem is, when you're preparing for an invasion, you've got to have lots of supplies. You've got to have weapons and food. His supplies ran out, so he had to send most of his men back home to collect more resources. So when Hardrada landed in England, in the area that I've located on the map, Godwinson raced to meet Hardrada in the battle and defeated him at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. So that tells us the person that became the winner, the person that stood out as the victorious one in the Battle of Stamford Bridge was Godwinson. He was the one that won the battle. Unfortunately for Hardrada, he was killed. And so that meant that the rest of the people from Norway that had attacked on the 300 ships had to return home. But many of them had been killed. So the Vikings who were part of Hardrada's army, they had been attacked so heavily and so many were killed, out of 300 longships, only 24 were needed to go home. That tells us that so many of them were killed. So, in terms of this Battle of Stamford Bridge, I've highlighted some of the key things that you need to make sure that you're writing down as part of your notes. The other thing that's quite interesting, I find, is the distance Harold Godwinson had to travel when he went to meet Hardrada in battle. So remember that Hardrada is in the north, as he's attacked from Norway, and remember that Godwinson is down south in London. He has to march 210 miles in 5 days to get north. Imagine how tired his soldiers are going to be, especially when they have to walk all the way back home as well. You might want to add that fact to your notes about the 210 miles in 5 days, because it could be quite significant as something to mention next lesson. Now, what I'd like you to do now, Year 7, is pause the video just for a couple of minutes whilst you make some notes about this if you haven't done so already. Now, if you'd like to find out a bit more about the Battle of Stamford Bridge, this is a video that you can watch. It's not overly long, and it will give you a bit more extra information about the battle itself and hopefully give you a greater understanding if you're still not sure about it. There is a video link on Show My Homework for you to watch this. I've also placed it in the description box on YouTube. So it's up to you if you'd like to watch it. This is optional because you've got quite a few notes to make today, and if you think you're getting a bit behind, it might be worth saving the video till the end to see if you've got time. But if you'd like to watch this, give it a watch now by finding the link on YouTube or on Show My Homework. It's only 6 minutes long if you think you've got time. Okay, Year 7, so we've finished looking at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, the battle between Godwinson and Hardrada, the two Harolds. And remember that Hardrada had been defeated. Godwinson had killed him. And so Godwinson still remained the King of England. But remember, Year 7, there's still one more contender that's available, William of Normandy from France. So what we're about to look at now is the preparations for the next battle between Harold Godwinson and William of Normandy. So the first thing I'd like you to do, Year 7, is to make, again, a subheading for your notes. What were the preparations for the Battle of Hastings? That's your subheading, preparations for the Battle of Hastings. And again, just like last time, I'm going to talk you through the preparations for this battle. And again, I'll highlight some of the key things you need to write down. So the first thing you need to be looking at, guys, is the fact that William, remember, is attacking from France. And so in his attempt to invade England, he's going to need to gather some ships. William gathered an invasion fleet of ships, 700 strong. And he also had a large army available on these ships as well. So William had done some great preparation. And remember, his army is still healthy and fresh because he hasn't just had to fight a battle already. Whereas Harold, on the other hand, had to quickly march south from Stamford Bridge. Now, this is really important because what you've got to remember, guys, is that Harold Godwinson had already marched 210 miles in 5 days to get to the first battle. Then they fought the battle, and now they've got to march all the way back south again. Many of the soldiers were killed in the first battle, and the ones that were still alive were exhausted. Do you think this is a fair fight? William has 700 ships full of a large, fresh army, whereas Godwinson is having to fight with men who were exhausted from already having to fight a battle and march right across the country. So, at the moment, you might be thinking it's not a particularly fair fight. But one thing that Harold's army did do to prepare is they went to the top of Senlac Hill. So basically, once they managed to reach further south, so once they managed to march further south, they went to the top of a hill called Senlac Hill. And whilst they were at the top of this hill, they formed a shield wall to protect themselves. Now, what you've got to remember, guys, is that if the Saxons are stood at the top of the hill, Normans, who are with William, are going to really struggle to attack them, aren't they? I usually demonstrate this by standing up on a chair or a table to show you that I have a height advantage when I'm stood up high. You've got to think, guys, Saxons who are at the top of the hill can just shoot down at the Normans who are trying to merge north, or further up the hill, I should say, sorry, rather than north. And so you've got to think, guys, it was really difficult for William to get the Saxons out of this strong position. We're going to be talking next about how he manages to do this, because at the moment, the Saxons have the advantage. They are at the top of the hill, whilst the Normans are stuck at the bottom, and they're struggling to charge up. I would like you again to stop the video now, and just make again some notes under your subheading, preparations for the Battle of Hastings. Again, I've highlighted some of the key things that you need to include. So guys, we've just talked about the preparations that were made by William and by the Saxons led by Godwinson. Now for this next section, we're going to basically now look at the actual events of the Battle of Hastings. What happened? Who won? So first of all, you're going to need a subheading again. So your subheading this time is the events of the Battle of Hastings. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the events themselves. Remember, this is a battle between William and Harold Godwinson. Remember that William has 700 ships, 15,000 men, whereas Godwinson only has 5,000 Saxons. And at this point, they're exhausted from their first battle. So let's have a look at what actually happens then. We know at the beginning that the Saxons were at the top of Senlac Hill and the Normans were stranded at the bottom. So at the beginning of the battle, or at this point when the Normans realise they're in a difficult position, Normans begin to flee because they thought that their leader, William, had been killed. He hadn't. He took off his helmet, he showed them he was still alive, and instead he came up with a clever trick. What the trick was that the Normans, led by William, pretended to run away. And what you've got to think, guys, when the Normans pretend to run away, the Saxons chase them down the hill, and look what happens. They are both on even ground, and the Normans cut down the Saxons with their inexperienced soldiers, and basically the Normans used their much larger, much more skilled army to take down the Saxons. So the Normans' clever trick worked. They pretended to run away, the Saxons chased them, and therefore the Saxons were vulnerable to the more skilled and more, the soldiers that had a bit more energy than the Saxons had. William also had a well-equipped army. So for example, he had knights on horseback and archers, whereas Harold and the Saxons, they did not have a very skilled army at all. In fact, his army was basically housecarls, which are basically men who fought on foot with axes and any weapons that they could get. So what that means is you've got men on horseback, cavalry, running against men who are not trained in battle and are picking up anything they can get, like a pitchfork or something like that, perhaps an axe. Not skilled, and they're not well equipped. So again, this is not a fair battle. William, of course, uses his archers to break up the Saxon shield that was at the top of Senlac Hill. And essentially, what we begin to see is the Normans take advantage of the battle and begin to tear down the Saxon army. Again, I'd ask you just to stop the video now and make a few notes about this important part of the story, the events of the battle. Again, guys, for our last section now, you've done so well making your notes today. We're on our last section overall. So for this section, you're going to again need to do a subheading, which is the outcome of the Battle of Hastings. So as we've just seen on the last slide, at the beginning, Harold and the Saxons had the advantage being at the top of Senlac Hill. But William and the Normans used their clever trick to drag the Saxons down from the hill. And of course, then there was more of a fair battle between the two armies. But unfortunately for the Saxons, who were exhausted and had a much smaller army of 5,000 against the fresh 15,000 Normans, then you can imagine the Saxons were not successful. Instead, it's important that you do write down that Harold Godwinson was killed. Now, one of the things we do know is that Harold was killed during the battle, but what we don't know for sure is how he died. So most people believe that Harold was killed with an arrow in the eye. And the reason for this is because in the Bayeux tapestry, which shows the story of the Battle of Hastings, there is a man here is shown with an arrow in his eye. And this point of the story, it does actually state in the Bayeux tapestry that Harold was killed. So many historians assume that that person represents Harold. Unfortunately, it's hard to know for sure because every person who's a Saxon in the picture is wearing the same outfit. As you can see, this man here has also been killed, is wearing the same outfit. We don't know for sure which one is Harold. But we do know he was definitely killed, and that William was victorious, and therefore William became the new King of England and became William I, William the Conqueror. What I'd like you guys to do is again stop the video just to make some notes about what the outcome of the Battle of Hastings was. You need to make sure you mention that Harold was killed and how, and you can also write down that William had won and became the new King of England. Again, stop the video and make your notes. If you'd like to find out more about the Battle of Hastings, this is a great video to watch. Again, I have put the links on YouTube in the description box for you, and I have also put the link on Show My Homework. You can use either of the links, they're exactly the same. So if you've got a bit of spare time in this lesson, because you've carried out your notes quite quickly, then please do watch the video. If you don't think you've got time, maybe you could watch it at the end, or in your spare time another point. It's a great video, and it will really help you to understand the Battle of Hastings in a bit more detail. Okay, Year 7, you've done a lot of work today that's been note making, so well done. But I hope you've gathered a bit more about the story of why William won the Battle of Hastings. Remember that it's not just the Battle of Hastings we have to consider here. We've also got to remember that the Battle of Stamford Bridge happened first between the two Harolds. That definitely played a part in why William won the Battle of Hastings, didn't it? Because we know that Harold Godwinson was so tired from the first battle. But if you could choose one reason for why William won the Battle of Hastings, what would it be? I want you to consider a few things. Is there something that William did really well that helped him to win? Or is there something that Harold Godwinson did really badly, which helped Harold to lose and William to be successful? I would like to have a go at writing an answer to this question as a paragraph on your paper or in your books if you have your books with you. And it would be nice if you could share your ideas for this in the live lesson with your teacher at the very end of the lesson. Thank you very much for listening, Year 7, and well done for all your hard work in getting to this point of the lesson. Next lesson, we're going to be looking at why William won the battle in a bit more detail. So make sure you keep your notes safe as you'll need them next lesson, and you need to make sure you bring them back in school when you next see your teacher. Thank you very much, Year 7, and take care.